All right, we're going to start chapter 4, looking at learning and situational factors. So this video is going to be dealing with behaviorism, and then we will continue on to the others. So the big point of view for this chapter is that criminal behavior is learned. So the others dealt with kind of family issues and other risk factors from the home. Last chapter was biology, and now we are looking at things that are learned from our environment, and behaviorism in particular is of the mind that we learn everything from our environment. So there's 3 types of learning: classical conditioning, we'll talk a little bit about, instrumental learning, which we'll talk a little bit more about, and then social learning, which will be in the next video. So classical conditioning, which you will have heard about if you've taken an Introduction to Psychology course. So who remembers Pavlov's experiment with drooling dogs? If that isn't familiar, then this may be the first time you're hearing about it. But go ahead and watch video 1 and pause right here and watch video 1. Okay, so before we get into what happened in the office, let's go over this experiment really quickly. We understand and learn things from our experiences and association. So in classical conditioning, you pair stimuli repeatedly together, and then the reaction to one stimulus can result in the same reaction for the other. So it's a little bit confusing, so let's think about this. In the original experiment, a dog salivated or drooled when you put food in front of it, food or food powder. So this is called an unconditioned stimulus, because this stimulus right here, the food, is something that creates a response in itself. So the unconditioned response is drooling, and this happens naturally without anything other than pairing those two together. The neutral stimulus does nothing to the dog in this case. So you ring a tone or a bell, and the dog does nothing. So it has no bearing on the dog. Now, during conditioning, you pair this tone with the food repeatedly, and when the dog is with the food, as is up here, the dog drools. So in this during conditioning time, the dog learns to drool not only with the food, but when they hear the tone. So these two are always together in the conditioning time, which creates the response of drooling. So after conditioning is complete, the conditioned stimulus, or the tone, creates the conditioned response of drooling in itself. So here, notice there is no drooling. Not no drooling. There's no food. So the food is no longer necessary to get this response. So again, the conditioned stimulus alone, the tone, gets the dog to drool without the food being there. And this will continue on for a while, not necessarily forever, because the dog associates the tone with the food. And this is just another way to look at it, that you can look on your own and think about it without me talking through it. You can feel free to pause here and think about it for a moment, and I'm going to continue on. So thinking back across the video with Dwight and Jim from The Office, one of my favorites, and Pavlov's experiment, what was the response? So think, what was the response in either? What was the unconditioned stimulus? What was the conditioned stimulus? And what was the conditioned response? So the original response was Dwight saying yes and putting his hand out. So you would hold his hand out waiting for that mint. And with Pavlov, it was the dog drooling. That was the response. What was the unconditioned stimulus that got the response without anything else? With Pavlov, it was the meat or the meat powder. And in the office, it was Jim saying, do you want a mint or do you want to mint Dwight? Which then produced Dwight's hand saying yes, hand out and Dwight saying yes. So the conditioned stimulus, what was that new thing that was added in? The conditioned stimulus, the thing that was added in that doesn't do things on its own. The unconditioned stimulus is what does it on its own. Conditioned is what we're pairing in that's new. With both, it was the bell or the tone. So computer bell, that ding, or Pavlov's bell, or the tone, whatever you want to call it. The conditioned response was the computer bell ringing and Dwight putting his hand out. So without any mints, without Dwight, Jim asking. And then with the original experiment, it was the bell being rung and the dog salivates. So if you're not too sure about that, you can watch this part of the video over again. I do this rather quickly, both in person and online. You've heard this before, but if not, there are likely a lot of videos online that have things with classical conditioning. Now let's talk about operant conditioning. It's put forth by B.F. Skinner and argues that people learn behavior through punishments and rewards. So whereas our last one didn't deal with punishments and rewards, it was just repeated pairing, he goes beyond that and talks about how it has to do with a negative or perhaps a positive that you're getting out of a certain situation. So people are going to repeat it if they're going to get rewarded or get something good, and they'll stop doing it if they're punished. So our environment shapes our behavior, and not only our environment, but with people and places and things. So how does this work? Go ahead and watch video 2. Again, pause it here, and then come back when you are finished. Okay. Another one of my favorite shows with The Big Bang Theory. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So this is getting rewarded or punished for exhibiting that change in behavior. So one example is getting praise for completing a behavior, which is a type of reward. So if your mother smiles and says, good job, every time you eat broccoli, you may continue to eat broccoli because of that reward, depending on how desirable that reward is, of course. So why is your mom doing this? When we're younger, we care more about the feedback that our parents give us and the praise, not that we don't when we're older, but in this circumstance, if my mother at this day and age praised me for eating something I didn't like, I don't know if I would care too much, but when you're younger, again, this is more important to you. So you eat broccoli, maybe in the beginning you don't care about it as much, but you eat it here because you get that praise from your mother, and so you perhaps continue to eat broccoli and maybe end up loving broccoli. So it's learning to either make or withhold a response because of its consequences. Now here it's important to note consequences doesn't mean bad necessarily. It can be a good consequence, but it's because of what comes next. one process or part of this is called reinforcement. If we're reinforcing something, it makes us want to continue that behavior. So you get praise, like with the broccoli situation, or perhaps, I'm not sure what this kid, maybe the kid brought back a toy or was nice to his sister, and so we get a high five there. Or when I was training my dog Lily, she would pee inside, and so punishments would occur. But when she peed outside, I would immediately say good job, and I would give her a treat so that she understood peeing was for outside and on the grass. So giving that reinforcement immediately. The other side to this is punishment. So that could be you're doing a behavior like drawing on the walls in your mom's house here, and you're going to get scolded immediately. Or, as I just said with my dog Lily, she was peeing inside, so she would we would say no in a very stern voice, and would put her on a timeout with the lights off in the bathroom, hopefully so she wouldn't repeat those behaviors. There's a few different things here with positive and negative, both punishment and reinforcement. So let's start off here. Positive reinforcement is what we've looked at with the rewarding behaviors immediately, that we want them to do it again, and we're adding something good. So that positive is adding something good. As this meme suggests, drank all my milk. So as a reward, you immediately get to go play in the sand, which the baby really enjoys. Negative reinforcement is avoiding something. So I'm going to do the behavior again to avoid taking something away, to avoid getting my game system taken away. So I'm still doing something good. Reinforcement is making the behavior happen again. Do it again. But in this case, we are avoiding something unpleasant by doing this. So we're not gaining anything, we're just avoiding something, if that makes sense. And between these two, well, not necessarily between those two, basically the negative reinforcement is one that people are most confused about. They get it confused with punishment, both positive and negative, I guess. But remember, negative reinforcement means that you are avoiding something bad by doing a certain behavior. So I'm going to take the trash out to avoid being grounded. Okay, punishment. For both punishments, it's not continuing the behavior that was just completed. So we'll do the drawing on the walls example, and you are going to get something because of what you did bad. So you drew on your mom's walls, you're going to get a spanking. So that's positive punishment. Negative punishment is taking something away. So you drew on the walls, I'm going to take away your Game Boy. I'm going to take away your kitty. So the goal is to not get them to do it again, but what we're doing as punishment is different. Adding something, adding a spanking, or taking something away, taking away the toys. I'm going to stop it right here and start a new video. Hold on.